Hey folks, it's Laura with Rain Tree Nursery, and today we are here with Harry Omrau Bhagwandin, and he is a member of the Lewis County food community here by Rain Tree Nursery. And today he is going to show us how to graft fruit trees. I'm so excited about this.
Okay, well, let's get started.
So I have heard that one of the nice things about grafting is that you don't have to have a whole lot of special expensive tools. And I'm looking at what we've got here on the table, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of odd things here. Tell me about what you've got.
Well, you're correct. You probably already have your own set of hand pruners. And all you need to do is clean them up, get the past project's dirt off of them. Pruner is essential. The one tool that is a specialty, and you'll have to look for one, is a grafting knife. And a grafting knife is the essential part of this whole process. The better your knife, the more chances of a successful graft. So don't skimp on the knife. And it's a sharp knife. It's a beveled edge. And what I mean is it's got a chisel edge on one side and it's flat on the other, just like your chisel would be. So your pocket knife won't work because it's beveled on both sides, and it'll make your grafting cut that much more difficult. And this is going to be a cut that you probably have not ever done before, so there's a little bit of art to it, but as everything, the tool is the key. So knife, pruners are the two mostly used tools, and then we need a grafting rubber, which is just a band. You can get these at Rain Tree Nursery in small bundles of 10 or 20. They stretch, they're UV degradable, so you don't have to ever bother them. Once you wrap them around that graft union, the sun will break it down. So I know there'll be a tendency to want to look and peek, but you don't want to touch it until that starts to fall off. Just let the sun naturally erode it away. It's got some stretchability. If you don't have access to these bands, in a pinch, you can use masking tape. If you can still find masking tape, the blue tape would be good, the painter's tape. You can even use electrical tape, because it stretches and it's waterproof. So what you're going to want this product to do, whatever you use, is seal out moisture, seal in moisture from the graft so it doesn't dry out, and be somewhat flexible so it stretches as the graft grows.
Nice, yeah.
So those, and then I use Elmer's glue or any kind of wood glue, as long as it's waterproof. Carpenter's glue that is for external use. So if it says waterproof on the label or external use, that's the kind of glue you want to use. And what I do is I'll glue the tip of the finished graft, and we'll show that all later. It'll make sense to you later. So it keeps the moisture of the newly grafted cyan wood piece in and doesn't dry it out. Then you always want a label. Labels are handy. I have these, since I grow a lot of nursery stock, I have rolls of this stuff. You probably can get these at Rain Tree or any plant label, nursery supply, garden supply. You can even take plastic and cut it into strips.
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to use a Sharpie marker and write the variety of the graft and the date. And then I will put that on each graft. And that way I know I grafted that on May 3rd. And it's 2 weeks later, so those should be starting to open up. And then I have a honing stone that I keep my blade sharp. It's just like when you're in the kitchen sharpening your kitchen knives. You want to keep that blade nice and sharp and clean. So that's why we have everything on a bench here that's all cleaned off and free of dirt as much as we can help. So you don't want to get dirt on your fingers and be cutting an open graft wound. So there's a lot of little tricks, and I'm going to show, all this will make sense to you as we actually go through the demonstration of an actual graft, and maybe you'll pick up some things that you didn't know, or like, oh, maybe that's why my graft didn't take.
Yeah, I noticed these are brilliant.
My eyes are getting older, and I found these in a tool supply place. You probably order them online, but these are magnifying safety glasses. This is a 2.5 magnification, and oh my God, it makes a world of difference.
I bet it does.
Especially for doing detailed work. So I have these with me. Now they're part of my grafting toolkit.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got all of our tools. Everything's ready to use. Now, tell me a little bit about what does it actually mean to graft a fruit tree? What are we actually doing?
That's a really good question, and I'll be glad to show you. That's what we're here for. Okay, so first of all, have to emphasize that grafting is a kind of cloning. It's not a pure clone because you're putting a rootstock with a variety of an apple on it. That variety is the clone, and we're creating that particular cloned variety. So everything on top of the graft will be that apple producing variety.
Right, so you're making a genetic duplicate
I'm making
of the original tree that you've taken the scion wood from, right?
Now there's a little bit of difference in that the rootstock does influence somewhat, but for all intents and purposes, we are making a genetic duplicate of that variety of apple that you want in your backyard orchard.
Nice.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's what grafting is. Okay, so why do we graft? And what is a graft? First, why do we graft? So say there's your grandfather planted a fruit tree in your backyard, and you don't know what it is, but you know it's your favorite tree, not only because Grandpa planted it, but because it's a good apple pie tree. And you can't find it anywhere.
Right.
No nursery sells that tree, so you want to preserve it because it's getting old, you know it's going to die.
Yep.
Okay, so that's probably the number one reason why people do their own backyard grafting, because they want to reproduce that tree for future generations. And can't find it anywhere. Another reason people graft is because maybe they want to produce a lot of trees, and their budget limits the number of trees. This is a inexpensive way to create another clone of that favorite apple tree, and the cost of the rootstock is significantly lower. They can be gotten from nurseries like Rain Tree. And if you have that scion wood from your grandpa's tree, you can graft it right onto that tree and create an exact duplicate and plant it out wherever. Okay, so we just showed you the tools you need, and now we're going to show you the materials you need. So I pick my scion wood when the buds are fully dormant after the first frost is over. No, take that back. I get my scion wood after a first hard frost.
Yes, right.
Because I want to make sure that this scion wood is fully mature as it can be. Now we have a really detailed video.
Yes, there's a video on the website that you can watch about how to harvest scion wood.
Right now we're just going to focus on, I already have my scion wood. I told you the reasons why you got that scion wood.
Right.
It's been stored in the crisper of my refrigerator in a sealed plastic bag. I like to take a piece of newspaper or paper towel, moist it, wring it completely out, put it in there, and I don't have to do anything with that wood until now, which is now May or April, when I'm going to come to do the bench grafting.
Yep.
So the first thing I do is I make sure that I have my grafting wood labeled. We're going to be grafting today a variety called Williams Pride, really great apple. And I have collected scion wood. I collected it a while ago, and there's some things that I want to do. Put this out of the way, as I need to inspect my scion wood to make sure there's no mold. This looks pretty clean. If there is, you can take a clean rag and just wipe it down. Some people like to wipe it down with the disinfectant, but you don't need to. Just wipe it off the field dirt or whatever dirt was on there. And I'm going to look at the wood. Let me take this off. And there's some things that I'm going to instantly notice about this wood. I don't know if you see it, but some of these buds are starting to leaf out.
Yeah, they look really active. I can see color and they're
So if I
like
set
emerging.
this is still alive.
Uh-huh.
That's a good thing. The bad thing is it's so far gone because these bud scales that protect from the winter.
That looks like a good one.
That one is a good one. See how the difference between this one is swollen up, green is showing, the bud scales have cracked. It's ready to start growing. If I stuck this in a cup of water, it would actually leaf out.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if this had flowering tissue on it, you'd see little flowers, but then it would die because it has nothing to feed it. So what we're doing is putting a root system on this.
Yes.
That's why we call it rootstock. It's the part of the tree that creates the root that will support the life in this bud. So this is a mostly discard piece of cyanwood, and that's a disappointment because I only have 6 sticks with me, and so I'm going to have, and you can see the tops of these. Notice how the tops are leafing out first, and these bottom ones are more dormant. So if you're collecting and trying to propagate that old heirloom tree, and this is all the wood you have, don't throw it away yet because I can still use this dormant bud.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ideal because what I'm looking for is a distance between the buds. See these little swellings? They're called nodes, and the bud comes off of that. The distance between there is critical. So I've got maybe, what I'm looking for is let's show you. There was a stick that shows tight spacing. It depends on how fast this is growing. And there's not a lot of space between where I cut it and here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to make it difficult to get a good graft off of there, because what I'm trying to do is I am going to be making a cut like that, a slice through the wood. And I want to avoid this grain pattern caused by the swelling of the node. So I want to go in between nodes.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm looking for spacing in between nodes. I did that cut because I also want to inspect the cyanwood to see if it's alive. Now, if you look at this piece of wood, where I cut it first, it's brown.
Yes.
That tissue right there is dead, versus this green and somewhat moist. I can also tell that there's still a little moisture in this wood. You don't want your stick to be too dry.
Yeah.
Because again, anything you can do to limit a variable that's going to cause failure to your graft increases your chances of success.
Mm-hmm.
So I want good green wood, and this tissue right here, right underneath, like if you took your fingernail and scratched the bark,
Mm-hmm.
that one celled layer of tissue under there that's green is the part that has to grow into the rootstock.
Right.
So I'm looking just at this tiny layer underneath the bark skin, and you can almost see a line there.
Yes, yes.
That line is, that tissue is the living tissue that's going to form callus tissue and literally grow into the root.
And that's the cambium layer, right?
That is the cambium layer that people talk about.
Right.
That cambium layer there's a similar cambium layer here.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to match that up.
Yes.
If we get 50% match, or at least 1/2 of it,
Uh-huh.
we've got a 70-80% chance of this,
Really? Even with just one side matching?
with even just one side, because the wood is so small that eventually this is going to grow into its other side.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be fine with, that's why another thing to when you're collecting cyanwood, which is all in this video, but this thickness is about pencil thickness.
Right.
So
right.
that's a good size to be thinking about. We're in that range
Mm-hmm.
to be ideal wood. Again, Grandpa's tree may be a lot thicker. Now, just quickly, the cyan piece is 1 year wood. This was last year's growth from here to here. And that's this, if there was a bud on here, like you might be tempted to say, hey, there's a bud, a little baby bud there, I could just graft this piece on. it's going to severely limit your success.
Mm-hmm.
So this stick right here, the only good part of it is
last year's wood only.
Yeah, so
Gotcha.
this is basically, I'm going to throw this away. This is the piece.
Yes.
Now, inspecting the wood for any possible diseases. Some trees come with a disease, and you're like, how did I get that tree? Now, my friend, where I got this wood, he's a nurseryman, and he's going to be producing grafted trees. That's one of the reasons he wants grafted trees, because it's more cost effective for him to grow 100 trees starting from rootstock, and he's got the time in the greenhouses.
Mm-hmm.
And so he warned me that some of the wood that he took off of his Williams Pride had anthracnose.
Ooh.
And to look for that in the cyanwood, and which will show up as a little black spot, and I actually see some.
Oh, look at that.
So I'm going to call this a dud piece, and I don't even want my knife blade touching this. And it's going to make me feel better about not attempting to use it, because these leaf buds are already leafed out.
Right.
So again, that's a discard piece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's on the ground, I don't use it. It's done. So, and I don't throw out wood, even when I'm done grafting, because it may be that I want to go back and one that didn't take.
Right. Right. That's right. Because if you save the wood in its condition, put it back in the fridge, all the little pieces that you didn't use, if you have something that didn't take, you can go back and graft again.
And you can graft all year long.
Yeah.
So, bench grafting, which is what we're doing. We have a bench. We're doing it inside. Actually, such a nice day, we're actually doing it outside because it does kind of make a mess. What I now do is I'm going to inspect the caliper, or the diameter of the wood, and see how it varies. What I want to do is, remember, I'm trying for 100% match when I make that cut with my rootstock. So what I do is I kind of, and this takes a lot of time for a beginning grafter, but take the time to do it, because again, the more chances to limit variables, the better. So I just kind of go up and down, and I go, yeah, that pretty much will go anywhere on that stick. See how the diameters are almost duplicate. So that's a good one for that guy. And this one's a little fatter.
Right.
And notice how a tree is fatter at the bottom and tapers to the top. So I can adjust. There's no rule that says I must graft 3 inches up. No, I can graft wherever I want. And again, a little bit of background on rootstocks. The more rootstock you leave, like maybe a foot or so, you get more influence of that rootstock. Rootstocks affect the size of the tree.
Yes.
And I think we have a whole video on rootstocks. Either that or we're going to make one. But we're not going to talk too much about rootstocks, other than to say standard trees are cool and you should have some. This is an M111. It's a semi-dwarfing rootstock. It's suitable to a wide variety of the soil types that this guy has. He has a little heavier soil, and it's a little more versatile. So disease resistance is another factor, but again, those are details that we didn't come here for this video. What we came for this video is to see how you actually make a graft. So that's what I'm going to show you now. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm looking at my wood. I'm matching it up. I've got a variety of rootstock calipers. This one looks to be the best match for this piece of wood.
Yes.
I only have one particularly fat piece, so I want to use up my fat rootstocks, relatively speaking. And I look for the grain in the wood. Remember the distance between nodes. I want clear grain. I don't want a node to get in the way. And one of the secrets that I learned with grafting, if I have enough wood, is I can see how the graft has a concave and convex side. This top angle is up, and this one is
down.
Yes. Where there's a node in back of it. If I make this cut, I can actually effectively increase my inner node distance, and at the sacrifice of this bud, which I can also get a little bit more distance and not sacrifice a bud if I use it down here. And since I'm limited on wood, that's what I'm going to try to do. So I'm going to cut on the concave side. I'm sorry, the convex side is where I'm going to start the cut. And what I've noticed also is that the pressure of that convex structure kind of pushes the wood into the blade.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I can get a cleaner cut.
Oh, that makes sense.
So a little trick, but I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but every little bit of difference you make gives you more success. So I'm going to start the cut, and I want to make a cut from about here to here. And what I do is there's two ways to do this. One, remember, sharp knife. You can cut your finger. Keep your finger away from your knife. And I hold the wood steady against my chest, so that's not going to rotate a lot because I want to get one clean cut, and I hold my knife with the other hand and I move the knife. Some people will hold the knife steady and move the wood. It's personal preference. I just do moving the knife. So I start about here, and I'm going to just make a cut so that I can try to taper it all the way to the very end. So that's my first cut, and it's not quite what I'm looking for, so I'm going to make another cut to finish that off, following the same plane, and just
using your thumb to support the back of it because it's thin now.
Right, but my thumb is out of the way.
Yep.
And I'm holding it steady here, and I'm just shaving a nice clean one surface, so that's not a wiggly surface. Because remember, I want a smooth union between this wood and this rootstock.
Nice.
Now, I'm going to make the exact same cut on my rootstock to match this. Remember, this is the part we're trying to match up, this very thin line of cambium on the bottom. Some people can get perfectionist about this and have it come straight down to an oval like that.
Nice.
That's actually the preferred way for me. Remember, I only have to get half, but I'm going for 100%. So the way to do that is to just, these buds that are starting to leaf out, I can get those out of my way because I don't need those. In fact, we want to take all those off. And now I'm just going to match this up. Does that look about the same?
It does.
So I'll just match that up about right there. Now, one thing I want to point out is I could graft anywhere on this stick. The further down I go, the less influence this dwarfing rootstock will have on the final tree. So I don't want to go too low. Another reason for not going too low is I want to be above what I'll call the mulch line of the finished field planted tree, because if I get it too low, this stick could actually send out its own roots.
Right.
And if it's down here and you pile mulch up on it, that will root on its own, and then you've just lost the influence of your rootstock.
Right, and we always encourage people to put mulch on the base of their trees to conserve moisture, to keep the soil cool, to increase the biological activity of the soil. So, yeah, you don't want to have that graft down too low.
You don't want this to be leafing out.
Right.
Rooting out. So now, where was I? You will have to look multiple times, because once you cut this, you're going to have to... You can't cut it again. You can't glue it back together and start over. So I really want to take the time to match that up. And you just get better with time. And if in doubt, go high, because you know where it's thinner. And then I kind of
just... you can always cut down, but...
Right, and this is where it makes a mess, so you probably don't want to do this on your kitchen floor. But... in this case, I'll just add more soil. Now again, I'm looking for the same convex concavity internodal space. And this is as good as it's going to get. It's not exact what it was, but I'm going to now position this to make my cut about right there. And I'm a little high because I want to give myself an option to go lower if I need to. And I just make that exact same cut. Whoops. And you kind of slice the knife through. And then make a quick inspection to make sure I know this is good rootstock because it's leafing out.
Right.
But again, we're looking for this nice green cell layer here, the cambium. And this is kind of cool. The wood is kind of red.
Oh, it's true.
So you could kind of, those are rootstock characteristics that. Okay, so there's almost an identical cut there.
Look at that. That's nice.
And it looks,
good match.
I mean, there's some funny grain going on right there, but don't worry about that. And then see how that matches up just perfectly.
So, yeah.
There's a little bit of show, and I want to show you if you can see how I didn't quite get
But this side is so perfect.
Remember, we only are looking for, we only need 50% as a rule of thumb, but I think we've got close to 90 or better with that. Okay, so now that I'm confident that I've got a good match, the next thing is I only need one bud. And that's it. So I could cut this stick off right there and have one bud. And I like to do 3 because one bud may die. Then you got a perfectly good graft union with no buds. Then I got to start over. So I hedge my bets. I add another bud. And I typically use 3 because it leaves me a bigger stick, which is less dehydration. So the less chances of that scion wood stick drying out. The grafted part from the clone I'm making is called a scion. It's a S-C-I-O-N. The scion wood is the new wood that I'm using to recreate my clone. This stick, I'm going to use 3 buds, so I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3. 2 is fine. I'm going to use 3 because I have enough wood to do it, and I'm going to cut it at an angle where it's, I don't know how important this is, but now the water hits this, it's going to it's going to run off onto there and not the bud. Now, there's another process which we can add a second step, which will increase the amount of cambial contact, which is this is called a whip graft. This one cut was the whip cut. And I could add a tongue to it, which is another cut that goes this direction. But you can already see the problem with that. Didn't Mother say never cut towards you?
Your fingers.
So this wood will split out and it will go into your fingers and you'll be done with for the season of grafting. So I don't see any other advantage. It adds increased cambium contact, but you don't need it. I've never seen it, and I've been grafting for 30 years. The advantages aren't worth my cut fingers. So now, one advantage of having that cut is the stick will hold itself on. But I'm having no problem holding it with literally 2 fingers. I'm taking the grafting band, and I'm going to hold it at the bottom. So now, see, I can still, one hand, hold the band, everything, and the graft. And I'm going to be careful not to jiggle this from side to side, but don't be too worried about it because you can adjust it again. It's the same exact diameter, so I can just finger feel it.
It's almost going to be self-adjusting.
It's going to be self-adjusting. So I hold that in, and I'm going to grab this guy, and I don't want to reef it and pull it as taut as it can be. I just want to go, that's as tight, so I'm going to go about halfway. And while I'm wrapping, this thing kind of twists up, so I kind of twist and it'll untwist as I wrap.
Oh, smart.
So I'm going to take and overlap, and this is the hard part, is I gotta have that band hold itself on. So you see what I did there? I just wrapped over the little leader of the band there. Now, that's the start. Don't worry if I haven't got it covered on the band. I can go, the cut has to be completely covered because remember the purpose of this band is to hold in moisture from the cut you just made. It's like putting a band-aid. So I am going to go back down and make sure I've completely sealed off the bottom of my cut and then go back up. And I just overlap a half. Remember, I'm pulling halfway taut. And I just overlap, and if I need to untwist, see how it gets twisted up? I can just let go, but my finger's holding it. And then I grab it again, twist it again, overlap, overlap. Now here's the tricky part. So see where I'm getting up against that bud there? I don't want to wrap over that bud, so I'm going to kind of go below it and inspect to make sure I've got my complete
cut is all covered,
sealed up. Now here's how you tie it off. You go back, you wrap over your finger. So I'm wrapping my finger in there, and then I wrap under my finger. And then as I pull my finger out, see that?
Smart.
Don't touch it from here on out. Do not touch it. Even vibrating in the car can give it a potential, or bumping it with the other rootstocks, or bumping it on whatever. So really you want to just go take it and set it in a warm spot, maybe your garage. It doesn't need any sunlight right now. What's happening at this point is we're trying to get the tissue from this to grow into the tissue from your scionwood and heal off. We call that callousing. Just like when you create scar tissue on your finger. When you make a cut, this has got to heal. And that requires a certain amount of warmth. And so I don't want to do this in freezing weather. It needs to be about 40, 50 degrees. The warmer, the better. But if you get it too warm, then you're going to start forcing the buds to leaf out before that callus tissue is healed off. So there's a little dance between I want it to be cold enough, warm enough to heal off, but cold enough to not have that bud break out. If the bud breaks out before the callus tissue is fully formed, then it'll grow for a little while. It'll just suck all the moisture out of the scionwood, and because it's not connected to any root system, it'll dry out and die. So you want to just, now in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, you're forcing callus tissue to form here. When that's fully formed here, then these are free to grow, and in about 6 weeks it'll look like that from your new growth. Any growth from these will tend to grow below the graft.
Right.
You just kind of peel them off. They come off real easy.
Yep.
Because I want to force all the new growth now that I've grafted this into those 3 buds.
Yes, yes.
And I will let all 3 buds go, and at this point I can put this in my garden and just grow them literally this far apart. I have them in pots because remember, my friend is going to market these at the farmer's market as a grafted tree in a pot.
Right.
And he may pot these into bigger pots before he sells them. But pretend this is a garden row. Instead of planting potatoes, I'm literally planting my grafted trees, and they can be this close. It takes...
are you just sinking the pots? Or are you actually taking them out of the pots?
I could take them out of the pot, right, and just plant them like that. And just you just need a round point shovel, dig a hole, stick it in, heel it in with your foot, move to the next one, and that way I can easily water this. I can easily weed it all year long, and I can force all my growth up. These are going to be growing fast, especially in a greenhouse, so I would put a stake and tie it to the stake as it grows, so I get a nice tall tree, and let it get up about 3 to 4 feet tall before you take it and plant it out in its permanent location, similar to the size trees you get at your nursery. Those are the perfect ideal size. But if I wanted to, I could actually also take this right out into its permanent location and plant it. Just this size. I would want to keep it fenced from deer. I'd want to keep it fenced from rabbits. And I'd want to keep mowed around it, and I want to keep it watered.
Right.
Personally, I put them in my greenhouse in a nursery row because that way it's easier for me to water them.
Sure.
And I can train them up. But the advantage of planting it out right now is I never will again disturb the root system. Every time you transplant, you're disturbing the roots a little bit.
Yeah. Wow.
Either way works just fine. Apples are super forgiving. And if you, there's actually 2 steps. So let's do this step next. I take and I will take my tag, some way of tagging it. Sometimes in a pinch, I will write right on the stick with a Sharpie. So I'll take it and I'll write the variety. Remember, this is Williams Pride.
Right.
So these markers will fade in one season. So don't have any thoughts that this will be a permanent marker. It won't. Most of my trees have faded, and I have no idea what they are anymore. So I have to wait until they fruit before I key them back out.
Yeah.
So I put the name, and now I've gone to those aluminum tags where you write. Yeah,
yes,
they're so much better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got the name, and then I put on the back. What's the date today? See the third. Today is the 3rd, so I'm going to do 5/3/22, and this tells me when I actually grafted it. The temptation is to go and pull this off and go, is it growing?
No,
did it make it? No. Don't be tempted. You'll be able to check the label, and it says 5/3/22. So I know that the first week of May, so about the last week of May, it better start looking like this on the top, or my graft didn't take.
Yeah.
And it's time to redo it.
Yep.
Do it over somewhere lower.
Yep.
And then the final step is to take your exterior wood glue and just put a little dip. They actually have a special glue just for this, which I believe you can buy from Rain Tree as well. They have all the grafting supplies you need, but Elmer's glue works just fine. And then I set this aside and get the next one. So that, do you have any questions, or does that help explain things?
No, I mean, like,
better?
how long did you practice on random sticks before you got a real good feel for how to pull and, you know, how to maneuver smaller cuts? Like, how much did you practice?
Well, that's a really good question, because I made it look easy, right? Remember, I've been grafting.
You've been doing it for 30 years, so.
So here's the thing. Don't practice on your
cyan wood, right?
What I do is I go into the woods and I get into the woods like an alder tree, similar kind of tree, or prunings from your apple. And I'd say try at least 100.
Yeah.
Just cake the sticks and literally go through until you can make that cut, and make that first cut in 1 or 2 slices. So I know that I've already pre-tested this. I know it's going on this rootstock. So I'm going to go, remember I did the concave.
Right.
I'm going to sacrifice this bud this time. And when you can make that cut, so the problems you're going to have, which I'll easily demonstrate here, is your length of your cut isn't as ideal. Remember that other one was a little bit longer? So you're going to have to adjust the angle that you place your knife, so you can get more of a
area.
It's more surface area. That's kind of the ideal. What is that, about twice your knife? 2.5 times your knife. The more the merrier. Sometimes you don't have that because of the node distance, but that's a good length to shoot for. And then quickly we'll just go through another one real quick. So this was my other fat guy, and we got a match here. So that's where I would go from there.
You got a new stick to work with. Beautiful.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, good question. Lots and lots of practice.
Yeah.
But with a good knife, and remember, if it's not cutting correctly, sharpen it. Take some time to go back to your fine and just hit it a little bit more and get it sharpened up, and then make those cuts. Practice, practice. And you'll be grafting. And like I said, if you follow all these, try to limit those tips, you can get 80 to 90%, 100% over time.
Nice. So there you have it. A little bit of practice makes perfect. And then you can end up with brand new trees by working with your grafting skills. You can salvage all of those beautiful old vintage trees that you find out when you're wandering around. What a treat to know how to do this well.
Yeah, it's an old skill, but it comes in useful. And I found that your neighbors will appreciate you too.
No doubt.
Bring him a grafted tree for dinner.
Ah, very nice. Thank you for joining us. It's Laura from Rain Tree Nursery. We will see you next time.